Kunja Bihari. Gopichana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopichana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Bhagavad Paramahansa Parajikacharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Mr. Bhagavad Paramahansa Parajikacharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Hare Krishna. Okay. What verse are we on? Is it 24? You're not sure? Oh, wait a minute. It's in the wrong chapter. How did I get in the wrong chapter? All right. All right. Yeah, we did. Okay, 27-28, bottom of 253. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 5th day of August 2019 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in chapter 5 entitled Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. Text 27-28, the bottom of page 253. Sparshan kritva bahir bhayangsh Chakshuschayavantare bhruvo Pranapana samao kritva Nasabhyantadacharina Yatendriya mano buddhir Munir moksha parayanaha Vigatecha bayakrodho Yaksada mukta eva saha. Okay, one second. Sparshan kritva bahir bhayangsh Chakshush chayavantare bhruvoho Pranapano samao kritva Nasabhyantadacharino Yatendriya mano buddhir murir moksha parayanaha vigate cha bhayakrodho yaksada mukta eva saha. Parashakti Maharaj. Sparshan kritva bahir bhayansh chakshus chayavantare bhruvo pranapano samo kritva nasabhyantadacharino yatendriya mano buddhir munir moksha parayanaha vigate chambaya krodho yasada mukta eva saha. Go ahead, Damna. Sparshan kritva bahir bhayansh chakshus chayavantare bhruvo pranapano samo kritva nasabhyantadacharino. Finish it up. Yatendriya mano buddhir munir moksha parayanaha vigate cha bhaya krodho yasada mukta eva saha. Okay, I'll read them word by words. Sparshan, sense objects such as sound, kritva, keeping, bahi, external, bayan, unnecessary, chakshu, eyes, cha, also, eva, certainly, antare, between, bhruvoho, the eyebrows, prana, apano, up and down moving, air, samo, in suspension, kritva, keeping, nasa, abhyantara, within the nostrils, charino, blowing, yata, controlled, indriya, senses, manaha, mind, buddhi, intelligence, munihi, the transcendentalist, moksha, for liberation, parayanaha, being so destined, vigata, having discarded, itcha, wishes, bhaya, fear, krodaha, anger, yaha, one who, sada, always, muktaha, liberated, eva, certainly, saha, he is. Translation. So he's describing one who is experiencing Brahma Nirvana and who is on the Brahman platform, Brahmabhuta. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. Purport. Being engaged in Krishna consciousness, one can immediately understand one's spiritual identity, and then one can understand the Supreme Lord by means of devotional service. When one is well situated in devotional service, one comes to the transcendental position, qualified to feel the presence of the Lord in the sphere of one's activity. This particular position is called liberation in the Supreme. This is Prabhupada's phrase for this Brahma Nirvana, which comes up again and again here, and has come up in previous verses. After explaining the above principles of liberation in the Supreme, the Lord gives instruction to Arjuna as to how one can come to that position by the practice of the mysticism or yoga known as Ashtanga Yoga, which is divisible into an eightfold procedure called Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. In the 6th chapter, that's the next chapter, the subject of yoga is explicitly detailed, and at the end of the 5th, it is only preliminarily explained. One has to drive out the sense objects such as sound, touch, form, taste, and smell by the pratyahara process in yoga, and then keep the vision of the eyes between the two eyebrows and concentrate on the tip of the nose with half-closed lids. There is no benefit in closing the eyes altogether, because then there is every chance of falling asleep. Nor is there benefit in opening the eyes completely, because then there is the hazard of being attracted by sense objects. The breathing movement is restrained within the nostrils by neutralizing the up-moving and down-moving air within the body. By practice of such yoga, one is able to gain control over the senses, refrain from outward sense objects, and thus prepare oneself for liberation in the Supreme. This yoga process helps one become free from all kinds of fear and anger, and thus feel the presence of the Supersoul in the transcendental situation. In other words, Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of executing yoga principles. This will be thoroughly explained in the next chapter. A Krishna-conscious person, however, being always engaged in devotional service, does not risk losing his senses to some other engagement. This is a better way of controlling the senses than by Ashtanga Yoga. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Udmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Shri Parampara. So here we have a little preview of the next chapter. And despite all of the success described in the previous verses of attaining indifference to external, going back to text 21, bias spatius asaktatma, not wanting to contact the sense object with the senses, and enjoying the happiness within, being linked up to Brahma through yoga, and experiencing unbreakable happiness, such a devotee still has work to do, and that is controlling the senses. The process outlined here, as Prabhupada so nicely explains in the purport, is really quite difficult. Ashtanga Yoga. I tried it. Did you ever try it? I mean, who knew? But they taught us asanas. I even got to the point of being able to sit for some time in full lotus posture. I did some yama and niyama. That wasn't so much emphasized. That's where the 4 regs come in. Yama means restraint, and niyama means what you do. But the asana, the pranayama, and the dharana, and the supposed dhyana, this is what we're trying to do. It's a little baby yoga, But in spite of that, it still had some benefits. It's very calming, this pranayama. So that the benefits are there, and you come back, pay your $10 or whatever it is. But really, to come to the point of samadhi, I don't know if, none of the people I was hanging out with, some of them would brag that I was in samadhi for a few minutes or something, but the whole idea in bhakti is to come to the point of samadhi and stay there fixed on Krishna for 24 hours a day. And when, Prabhupada describes it in his lectures, he's saying, you can do it, go for it. He's giving us encouragement that it's actually possible. Well, that's not so easy even in bhakti yoga. But the whole idea here is that there's a little description here, and it will be more detailed in the next chapter. And as we know, despite all of the nice description, Arjuna feels incapable. Chanchalam himana Krishna, the mind, which is after all the whole point, is to wrestle that mind and fix it on the super soul, or fix it on Krishna's lotus feet. Not easy. The mind is very obstinate, uncontrollable. So then in chapter 7, Krishna begins the process really of telling us about bhakti yoga. And it's a whole lifestyle he's talking about. He doesn't say go off to some lonely place and sit on this special seat and he says in your daily activities you can begin to see me everywhere if you understand the basics of my energies and your position in that and what my position is and so forth. And so that's really the first step in God realization. There's a chapter in Canto 2 of the Bhagavatam called the first step in God realization, and it involves the universal form. Now the universal form, of course, is chapter 11, but that's a certain expression of the universal form. It's a different kind of manifestation that is described in the second canto. And that's the one where you don't just see the sun, but knowing that this great universe is the external body of the Lord, you see that sun as Krishna's eye, and the moon is another eye. The mountains a little bit east of here, they're the bones of the Lord, and the rivers are the veins and all of these different things. Now, this is not a meditation that we really emphasize here in Krishna consciousness, but it's a species, or it's a variety of what we read in the 7th chapter, and a little more in the 9th chapter, a little more in the 10th chapter. And that is to see the things of this world and our experience of them, our tasting water, our seeing the light, our smelling the fragrance of the earth or the rose or whatever it may be, as involving Krishna's energies. And just as when you're Krishna conscious, or just as I say, a mother who's very conscious of her child and sees any little remnant of the child, reminds her of the child, because the mind is always there anyway. And so, so she's conscious of her child because there's a lot of love there. So similarly, when we begin to serve Krishna and feel reciprocation from him and understand his energies, then everything in this world can remind us of Krishna. That's the whole idea. Then where's the need for samadhi? You're already thinking of Krishna. That's the idea, the first step in God realization. Now, in conjunction with that, we also have the deities, the holy name, all the things that especially attract us to Krishna and the service of Krishna in certain ways. But the principle is there, and here, what if we can accept or internalize, say, the instructions, the lessons from this chapter, will be well on our way to understanding and living in such a way that we have a better chance of rising up to the Brahmabhuta platform. So much of this chapter was seeing ourselves as spiritual and trying to act in such a way beyond the modes of nature, and developing detachment or vairagya. I always go back to text 21 and 22. Bayasparsheshu asaktatma vindadyatmana yatsukam. One who doesn't try to enjoy the touching of the senses to the sense objects, but enjoys the happiness within. Brahma Yoga Yukta. Such a person is Brahma Yoga Yukta, is connected with Supreme Brahman, Krishna, in yoga. And the result, Sukha Makshayam Ashnute. It's like an expansion of this verse from Rishabdev, his very first verse, which I think is also quoted in this chapter. Yep. And the next purport, that human life is not meant for agitating the senses with sense gratification. Even the hogs do that. This is one of the strong statements of the Bhagavatam. Don't be like the hog. Don't degrade yourself by becoming completely absorbed in the senses and the mind. Understand the higher mission of human life, and with he uses the phrase tapo divyam, with divine or sacred penance and austerity, understanding the importance of it, and the importance of the purification that takes place. That purification of what? All of these latent desires that are buried in our senses, mind, and intelligence, which we've developed for millions of births. They have to be purified. Those are impurities. They're preventing us from seeing our true selves and experiencing ourselves and the divine, because we're so absorbed in the senses. So that tapodivyam putuka yena sattvam shuddhyet, by that austerity you'll purify your existence. Every part of your life will become purified. Of what? Kama, krodha, and vita and raga. The word that we read is vigata itcha bhaya krodha. Itcha is the same as raga. So we've already had vita, raga, bhaya, krodha. This is one of the phrases that's repeated in Bhagavad Gita. Free of attachment, fear, and anger. And they go in that order. If you're attached, from the lust, anger develops, right? We learned that in the 2nd chapter. And when that anger is, expressed, sometimes it causes great fear, because whoever you're expressing it at is also expressing it at you. So these three are inevitable concomitants of living in the material world with no reference to spirit, no reference to Krishna. But here he's describing, free of those things. So that's described in text 21 and also 22, which I like to describe as a very revolutionary verse. Just like this whole movement is revolutionary. But the revolution is in the hearts. That's where it all begins, in your consciousness. Sangsparjita bhoga dukkha yonevate. that the very pleasures you enjoy in contact with the senses, and it includes the mind. So much of the pleasure is just on the mental plane, but it's just as real as any sensual pleasure. Is the source of dukkha yoni, is the source of your misery, and the main misery, or the inevitable part of that dukkha is that it has a beginning and an end. You hanker for it, and then if you have the karma for it, you experience it, and then it's gone in the rearview mirror, and you hanker, trying to get it again. So having a beginning and an end is very frustrating for the soul, because as part and parcel of Krishna, we're constitutionally eternally blissful. It's not meant to end. That's what's so great in Goloka. It doesn't end. There's this cycle of pastimes spoken of by the great acharyas who realize it. But there's no point where it's like, we're so bored. What are we going to do today, Subal? Should we go play with Krishna? We did that yesterday. We're going to do something. It's not like that. It's ever new, ever fresh. Now, can you imagine on this plane, being advanced enough to be able to chant Hare Krishna and experience that name as ever fresh, as fully satisfying? There's nothing else to do. I read. Where did I read this? Maybe it was Dandavats. There was some remembrance of Bhakti Bringa Govinda Swami. He spent years in India, in Vrindavan. I don't know if you remember, Yojapati. He was doing a whole prasadam program there, so he lived there. And somehow he had the idea that he was going to go out and find a devotee who was a realized soul in chanting, who had achieved perfection in chanting Hare Krishna. So where to look, So one of his friends there, who was a local, he said, I'm looking for someone who's a Siddha Purush in chanting. I'm looking for someone who's... He said, I know someone. And they went to this obscure little hut somewhere, and they knocked on the door, and this Babaji came to the door. So Bhakti Bringa goes to Swami and says, well, what is your program? What's your sadhana? Well, I get up very early, 3 o'clock, and I perform ablutions, and sit down to chant at 4 a.m. Well, when do you stop? 5 p.m. I don't stop until 13 hours later. And so, and Bhakti Bringa was like, he offers obeisances, that to be able to chant with concentration, just to be able to do that for 13 hours. I mean, that's, of course, Haridas Thakur chanted for 16 hours. That's how we got 300,000 names, which is really, it's less than what he chanted. If you count it out, 64 rounds is quite a bit, it's like 130,000. If you multiply it out, we're chanting like 27,000 names a day with 16 rounds. So at 64, which is like a standard, that's quite a bit more than 100,000, but they rounded off to that. So that's why it's 300,000 names, not mantras, names. And 16 hours. The Prabhupada said, how long would that be? And someone guessed 16 hours, says yes. That's 5 minutes around. Did you ever try to do 5 minutes around? Pretty fast. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I used to time my rounds. That's about it. It's too fast for my brain. So if you do 7, you're doing pretty good. But the whole idea is, well, how can you do that unless you're feeling bliss? You're really totally concentrated on every syllable of those mantras, which you're really whipping away. It's not easy. But that's the purity. When the purity is there's not a tinge of material desire, distraction, all of this stuff that goes on in our brains, But you're completely focused because every name is Krishna. You're experiencing the full personality and form and qualities of Krishna in each name. So where is there any room for boredom? It's like it's a complete experience. That's why it's said in the Shastra that the name is Krishna. Where did we hear? We just heard about this. Oh, this was up in Rathayatra. Vaisheshika Prabhu was giving a talk. Were you there? I know, at the question and answer booth. Oh, you didn't get to go. I'm sorry. I stayed there for some minutes. Jamal was there, and of course Ace was there. And I think Glenn was also sitting there, right? Yeah, a lot of our people were there. And it was very brilliant, It was just speaking in such a way, full of realization, and he would quote shlokas, but it was such a way that everyone could understand. So he quoted this verse from the Namashtaka by Rupa Goswami, And And it's really important to read the realized soul's expression of how they're experiencing the mantra. You know, so the most famous one is Tunde Tandamanita Ting, where he says, "Oh, I want to have millions of tongues to chant. Why just one?" In other words, it's so sweet. I want to have so many more. And the ears, I want to have millions of ears. I can hear those nectarian syllables. You know. But this one, he says, "My dear Lord," he's addressing the name. Bacham bachika mityudeti babato nama swarupa dvayam. My dear Lord, you have two main forms: you yourself and your name. So it's the named and the name. Krishna himself is the named and the name. So he says, of those two, my feeling is that the name is even more merciful than you yourself. Because if someone commits all kinds of offenses to you personally, and I think of deity offenses you can commit, so many offenses, but is chanting you, religiously and nicely, and then you still shower him with all kinds of mercy. In other words, you can, but if what's not said in the verse, if you offend the name, you have no way. Not in this age. You're not going to do this Ashtanga Yoga. So the holy name is really our the great blessing of Lord Krishna as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on us in this age, because we're totally disqualified. There's no way we could even begin this Ashtanga Yoga. I mean, I tried in my little baby way, but generally those who are preaching it, they're trying to exploit the followers. Because if you're not giving them something, first of all, it's a great cheating thing, even if you don't get any money. If you're trying to push this method that's virtually impossible for anyone to succeed in this life, in this age, especially you got to have a job, you have to support yourself somehow, then you're cheating. And the only motive for cheating is to try to get some monetary thing, and we see that's what happened again and again. But Prabhupada never did that. He's giving the holy name out for free, beating his bongo drum in the middle of Tompkins Square Park for 3 hours, And it was attractive because it was the real thing. He was giving the holy name out. He's not selling it, giving it. And he had a few followers who were a little enthusiastic, it was a whole spectacle. It was something genuine. And that chanting of the holy name, did I mention this last? I don't know. Maybe I mentioned this. No, I didn't give class since then. So I did this morning in Isha Upanishad. Anyway, it was Sura with chanting. He was chanting. When I got there, you see, usually I stay with the cart till the end with Balaram, but I was so exhausted. It was so hot, And so I got tired and I went ahead. And so there's a stage show that takes place before the carts come. And what I really realized then is that stage show is just Hare Krishna. Sura was on there with his whole band. He's got this temple bhajan band. And there was this Chinese or Japanese lady sitting there and just chanting with a tambura in total ecstasy. And Sura was up there. It's a miracle, this Sura. He's had serious diabetes for several years. I mean, years and years. He lost half a foot, he showed me it. Huh? He had a kidney transplant. Yeah, not dancing because of the diabetes. But there he was wailing away. It sounded like the old Sura. It could have been 20, 30 years ago. I was amazed because when he talks, you can hear his voice is okay. And he was singing. He had this whole band, And he was just chanting Hare Krishna. He wasn't going off into something else, dancing or the drumming or whatever, The people need Hare Krishna. And so I said, wow, this is the way it used to be. In the old days, this devotee from Vancouver would come down, Bahudak, you remember him? And he would spend all day, wailing away, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. A lot of devotees would dance, go away, come back, Hare Krishna. And so I was just happy to hear that. And then I realized, and then the deities finally came and they put them all on one cart, And then the actual stage show started and Sura got off. Anyway, I'm not going to criticize, but that preliminary stage show was the essence of the whole thing. So we should take advantage of the method that's been given to us. And as Prabhupada always says in these purports, here's this description, right, 28. It's all 2 verses, 27, 28. It's all about Ashtanga Yoga, shutting out all the things. Being engaged, then it starts to purport, being engaged in Krishna consciousness. He doesn't even waste any time on it. One can immediately understand one's spiritual identity. In other words, he always brings every purport basically back to the process of bhakti. And that's why this is as it is. And why when you read this version of the Bhagavad Gita, you want to become a devotee. Otherwise, you're not sure what to do. Sarva dharma mamekam sharanam vraja. Well, how do I surrender to Krishna, practically? You don't know, and there's no movement behind it. It's just a book. But this was an integral part of the movement of Hare Krishna. Then you can do it. If you really want to do it, you go to the temple, you meet someone else, get online, whatever, you get further instruction. So that's what we're experiencing here. And we're coming back to this Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha. It doesn't say it that way because he says it a little differently. But giving up attachment, fear, and anger. If you don't give up attachment, you have to experience fear and anger. Because it's just the way the material world works. It's not built for us to be the enjoyers and controllers here. It's built to facilitate our development in bhakti, to use our paraphernalia, beginning with this body and mind and voice and whatever money we have, to connect with Krishna. And it's practical. And so, this chapter, and then it ends with this beautiful peace formula that Prabhupada gave us. He called it the peace formula. You can see why it ends with Shanti. Any questions on text 2728? Should we go on? We can finish the chapter. We have 10 minutes. Then we can do Upadeshamrita. All right. This is perhaps the most memorable verse in the whole chapter. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam Gatpa mam shantim richati. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Purport. The conditioned souls within the clutches of the illusory energy are all anxious to attain peace in the material world. But they do not know the formula for peace, which is explained in this part of the Bhagavad Gita. The greatest peace formula is simply this: Lord Krishna is the beneficiary in all human activities. Men should offer everything to the transcendental service of the Lord, because he is the proprietor of all planets and the demigods thereon. No one is greater than he. He is greater than the greatest of the demigods, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. In the Vedas, Shvetashvatara Upanishad 6.7, the Supreme Lord is described as Tamishwaranam Paramam Maheshwaram. Under the spell of illusion, living entities are trying to be lords of all they survey, but actually they are dominated by the material energy of the Lord. The Lord is the master of material nature, and the conditioned souls are under the stringent rules of material nature. Unless one understands these bare facts, it is not possible to achieve peace in the world, either individually or collectively. This is the sense of Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna is the supreme predominator, and all living entities, including the great demigods, are his subordinates. One can attain perfect peace only in complete Krishna consciousness. This 5th chapter is a practical explanation of Krishna consciousness, generally known as Karma Yoga. The question of mental speculation as to how Karma Yoga can give liberation is answered herewith. To work in Krishna consciousness is to work with the complete knowledge of the Lord as the predominator. Such work is not different from transcendental knowledge. Direct Krishna consciousness is Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga is a path leading to Bhakti Yoga. Krishna consciousness means to work in full knowledge of one's relationship with the Supreme Absolute, and the perfection of this consciousness is full knowledge of Krishna, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A pure soul is the eternal servant of God as his fragmental part and parcel. He comes into contact with Maya or illusion due to the desire to lord it over Maya, and that is the cause of his many sufferings. As long as he is in contact with matter, he has to execute work in terms of material necessities. Krishna consciousness, however, brings one into spiritual life, even while one is within the jurisdiction of matter, for it is an arousing of spiritual existence by practice in the material world.
The more one is advanced, the more he is freed from the clutches of matter. The Lord is not partial toward anyone. Everything depends on one's practical performance of duties in Krishna consciousness, which in every respect helps one control the senses and conquer the influence of desire and anger. And one who stands fast in Krishna consciousness, controlling the above-mentioned passions, remains factually in the transcendental stage, or Brahma Nirvana. The Eightfold Yoga mysticism is automatically practiced in Krishna consciousness because the ultimate purpose is served. There is gradual process of elevation in the practice of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. But these only preface perfection by devotional service, which alone can award peace to the human being. It is the highest perfection of life. Thus end the Bhagavatam purports to the 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of karma yoga, or action in Krishna consciousness. So we'll speak about this first a little here, and then we'll review the chapter tomorrow. So Bhoktaram Yajnatapasam. Here, Prabhupada calls this the peace formula because at the end, Shantim Richati, one can attain real peace. Now this peace is spoken of extensively in the 2nd chapter. And basically the conclusion is, Vyaya Kaman Yaksarvan Pumam Chadadi Nikspaha Nirmamo Narahankara Sashanti Marigachati. One can say that's also a formula for peace. But it's the same idea. The verse in the 2nd chapter says, Vyaya Kaman Yaksarvan, giving up all material desires. Not so easy, but this is a prerequisite. Vyaya Kaman Yaksarvan Pumam Chadadi Nikspaha, and thus living free of this selfish desire. And then, nirmamo narahankara, really feeling that nothing is mine, everything belongs to Krishna. This is this famous akinchana or nishkinchana platform. One may be a billionaire, but if he actually feels, oh, this money all belongs to Krishna, so let me use it to build so many temples and so forth, he's also a kinchana. But the general process is that you literally go through a stage, at least, of renunciation, where you're living extremely simply, never like that. But either way, it's an internal attitude. Nirmamo nirahankara, meaning I don't have, this false sense of being the doer of everything. And because I am the doer, I'm also the controller and the owner and the enjoyer. You're understanding the impetus for your action is coming from above. It's coming from Krishna through the spiritual master or whatever. You don't have your own independent program. And that's why there's a phrase that comes up in later chapters called Sarvaramba Parityagi. This is one of the qualities that Krishna says makes the devotee very dear in the 12th chapter. Sarvaramba Parityagi. Now it's interesting because the word aramba means to start something. So you know how this is phrased in English, doing something on one's own initiative? Meaning that this is my idea, and I'm going to complete it, So in the material sphere, it's good to take the initiative and come up with it. But in our understanding, we understand that the real initiative begins with Krishna and then passes through his representatives and then we act. So if everything, just like this says, whatever you do, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, do it as an offering to me. That means that at every moment, ideally, we should be conscious of Krishna and what he wants us to do at that time and that place. And that's pure Krishna consciousness. In other words, there is an appropriate duty to perform at every moment. There's a moment to take rest, there's a time to get up, there's a time to eat, and a way of doing it of a state of consciousness, so that one maintains one connection to Krishna. And that's sarvaramba parityagi. You've given up all this independent, I'm going to do this because I want to do this, it's my idea. You take your ideas from the Shastra, which is taken from Krishna, or from the spiritual master, which is he's channeling Krishna, you want to use that phrase. And in this way, you feel yourself an agent, just like the hand. If it starts doing stuff on its own initiative, you got problems. Isn't it? Right. So, or it's not doing what you wanted to do. That's another problem. That problem. So, that's what's described here in this final verse, that you understand that Krishna is the enjoyer of all your yajnas and tapasas, all your activity, all the sacrifices, all austerities. He's the Lord of all the planets and all the universes and all the solar systems. But he's not just remote, powerful controller that doesn't care about us because we're just too small to matter. No. Suridam Sarvabhutanam. He is the best friend, well-wishing friend of every living entity. So he's the greatest that can possibly be, powerful beyond our imagining, but at the same time, he's concerned for every single one of us. This is an essential part of bhakti. Otherwise, it's not bhakti, it's just fear and trembling, really. So understanding all of these elements, Krishna is the enjoyer of my activities, sacrifices, austerities, whatever it may be. He's the Ishwar, the supreme controller, but he's also the best friend. Sudhita Prabhu says is your ever well-wisher. Does he use that, ever well-wisher? That the friend who always has your interest at heart, where do you find a friend like that on the material side? It's impossible. But Krishna is always, he stays with us through every body. He's always trying to give us good instruction. If one can understand this, you can attain real peace. And we saw it with Prabhupada. In spite of all the disturbances, I'm just reading in the Lilamrita in 72, and this whole thing going on with the Bombay land. We're going to read a wonderful account with Guru Swami. He's almost through with his book. But, he's traveling here, traveling there, trying to secure the Vrindavan land. He's touring the world, but meanwhile, his mind is in Bombay. He's getting, sending these telexes and telegrams, get the land, get the deed, get the land. They couldn't get it because the guy was trying to cheat him. So you can imagine all those, austerities Prabhupada was undergoing. But in spite of that, there was a certain peace that he had. He was able to, he had anxiety for the land, but then he would turn it off and be with everybody and do a program and give a wonderful talk, That means, that ultimately he's on this peaceful platform, this Brahma Nirvana platform. He's in Krishna's hands, whatever you want, Krishna ultimately. So that's a highly coveted platform, and that's the true Brahma Nirvana that he's speaking of in the previous verses. And how can we attain it? Chant your rounds. We've been given the process. All right, we'll review this chapter tomorrow, but now let us go on to. Did we finish the first verse? We may have. We are studying the Upadeshamrita, Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction. Bookmarks. Okay. Here we are, near the end. Okay. Oh boy. Okay, this is a long purport, so we'll go on. I'll just chant the verse myself, unless anyone can chant with me. Vacho vegam manasakrodha vegam jihva vegam murodopasta vegam etan vegan yo vishaheta dira savam apimam pratabingsa shishat, which means a sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So we've been reading this purport. Prabhupada's going through those elements we just mentioned. And now he talks about the mind. The mind has its own pushings, These are vegas. Vegas are like the urges. Certainly plenty of mental urges. The restlessness or fickleness of the mind, manovega, is controlled when one can fix his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 2231 says, this famous verse, Prabhupada took it as the motto of his Back to Godhead magazine. Krishna Surya Sama Maya Hoy Andakar Yahan Krishna Tahan Nahi Maya Adhikar. Krishna is just like the sun, and Maya is just like darkness. If the sun is present, there is no question of darkness. Similarly, if Krishna is present in the mind, there is no possibility of the minds being agitated by Maya's influence. The yogic process of negating all material thoughts will not help. To try to create a vacuum in the mind is artificial. The vacuum will not remain. However, if one always thinks of Krishna and how to serve Krishna best, one's mind will naturally be controlled. One time Prabhupada said the best way to control the mind is to always be thinking of new ways to spread Krishna consciousness. It's fully engaging. Similarly, anger can be controlled. We cannot stop anger altogether, but if we simply become angry with those who blaspheme the Lord or the devotees of the Lord, we can control our anger in Krishna consciousness. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became angry with the miscreant brothers. Who are the miscreant brothers in Navadvip? Jagai Madhai, Jagai and Madhai, who blasphemed and struck Nityananda Prabhu. In his Shikshastika, Lord Chaitanya wrote, Trinadapi sunichena, tadorapi sahishnana. One should be humbler than the grass and more tolerant than the tree. One may then ask why the Lord exhibited his anger. The point is that one should be ready to tolerate all insults to one's own self. But when Krishna or his pure devotee is blasphemed, a genuine devotee becomes angry and acts like fire against the offenders. I remember this sticks out of my mind, when Prabhupada first went to India with the first band of devotees, he had some ladies with him, You know who I ran into at the airport? Kaushalya, in the Rome airport. And I always remember this picture. You remember in Brooklyn they had this some black and white picture of her dancing in, what was that? Where did they go? That town where people were coming with them and putting, what is it? Surat. And that picture was so inspiring for me. She was obviously so absorbed, and the people were coming and giving them prasadam and everything. And so she I was wearing this, and we said hello and everything. But so one may be more humble than the grass, more tolerant than the tree. When Krishna's pure devotees, so the point is that during that tour, Prabhupada, the big draw was to see the dancing white elephants, to see these Westerners who'd never been seen before, so seriously having taken up devotional service. And there were some ladies amongst them, So one Indian guy, so they had, the first night in this pandal, they had come off the stage and into the audience dancing. It was very popular, they got people chanting and dancing. So the second night, Prabhupada was a little upset because they had him speak after all the Mayavadis, And so Prabhupada said, let me speak first, then we'll have kirtan and everything. But they didn't do that, they didn't. So Prabhupada was kind of, I don't think he even spoke at all. He just had him start dancing on the stage doing the kirtan. But they wanted him to come into the audience. So one guy went up to the stage and started pulling on one lady's sari to get her off the stage. Prabhupada went to he had the cartels, and he was about ready to slash the guy. And the guy was obviously let go. Prabhupada suddenly showed his ferocity in protecting the ladies because he knew he was responsible for them all. So that was a very interesting thing. He's describing that. Becomes like fire against the offenders. Prabhupada's probably thinking of that. Krodha, anger, cannot be stopped, but it can be applied rightly. It was in anger that Hanuman set fire to Lanka, but he is worshipped as the greatest devotee of Lord Ramchandra. This means that he utilized his anger in the right way. Arjuna serves as another example. He was not willing to fight, but Krishna incited his anger. You must fight! To fight without anger is not possible. Anger is controlled, however, when utilized in the service of the Lord. As for the urges of the tongue, we all experience that the tongue wants to eat palatable dishes. Generally, we should not allow the tongue to eat according to its choice, but should control the tongue by supplying prasadam. The devotee's attitude is that he will eat only when Krishna gives him prasadam. That is the way to control the urges of the tongue. One should take prasadam at scheduled times and should not eat in restaurants or sweetmeat shops simply to satisfy the whims of the tongue or belly. If we stick to the principle of taking only prasadam, the urges of the belly and tongue can be controlled. In a similar manner, the urges of the genitals, the sex impulse, can be controlled when not used unnecessarily. Genitals should be used to beget a Krishna-conscious child. Otherwise, they should not be used. The Krishna-conscious movement encourages marriage not for the satisfaction of the genitals, but for the begetting of Krishna-conscious children. As soon as the children are a little grown up, they are sent to our Gurukul school, which used to say our Gurukul school in Dallas, but since that closed up, we took it out of here, where they are trained to become fully Krishna-conscious devotees. Many such Krishna-conscious children are required, and one who is capable of bringing forth Krishna-conscious offspring is allowed to utilize his genitals. When one is fully practiced in the methods of Krishna-conscious control, he can become qualified to be a bona fide spiritual master. In his Anuvritti explanation of the Upadeshamrita, okay, I think we'll save that one for tomorrow, because he's going to go off into quoting extensively from Bhaktisiddhanta. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.